Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. If you're hanging around outside, please take your seats. We're about to kick off the next panel. Before we do so, just like to thank all our sponsors who made today possible. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the next panel. And we're, as I said, looking at ways to revolutionize the value chain, new areas, new products, including a little bit on the metaverse. So I'd like to welcome to the stage your moderator for the session, Mayanne Lim.
Hi, everybody. Our panel is probably the thing that's standing between you guys and lunch or doing something else. So I'm going to get the panelists to come on board and let's start as soon as we can. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about, I guess, new horizons and space where infrastructure players can revalue, redo things so that we can make more money, which is always interesting and good for us to be working on. Yeah, Mark is not saying maybe we might need to update the pictures a little bit. Thank you. All right, our discussion today is going to be how are digital infrastructure providers revolutionizing their value chain for a new reality. So I'm not sure whether we have come to grips with the old reality. I'm still trying to get used to the idea that we're back to face-to-face events. But I am very, very pleased to have physically in the flesh and not squares or rectangles on the screen, illustrious panelists here. And I'm going to get them, rather than me, mess up how they're going to be introduced. I'm going to get Amarjit, Sander, and then Mark to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what your role is and what you do, and also tell us about where you think the potential economies of scale and the value creation with this new reality. What is this new reality in your context? So Amarjit, Sander, and then Mark.
Thank you, Mayanne. And it's good to be in Singapore and not raining for a change. So yeah, my name is Amarjit Gupta. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Lightstorm. We're a newborn. We were born in the pandemic. We like that definition. And we were built to do exactly what the topic of the day is to build digital infrastructure of the new kind across India and neighboring countries. So that's where I'll leave my introduction. But as a general introduction, this is a topic which is so significant that every day we grapple with it. And I'll start by what's making headlines when I heard the famous person from the US who's on the news every day for the odd reasons. He says, the Twitter experience in India and Indonesia just doesn't work. And he went after the definition, which basically says 15 seconds to refresh, it just doesn't work. There was just one small problem. He fired the software engineer. And I think that's a wrong guy to fire. The guy to fire is the guy who's chosen his digital infrastructure. And that's what is making the difference. I wish I could speak to him and let you know. But that's the opportunity for digital infrastructure in the modern age. It's the combination of applications, software smarts, and some great transformed digital infrastructure, which makes consumer experience so exciting. And to be at the center of it in a market which perhaps got the largest amount of youth users just yearning for more and more digital experiences, that makes my day. That makes me come to work every day.
Thanks, Amarjit. I love the fact that Amarjit is on the panel because a lot of people actually ask me, hey, Mayanne, in your role with the Asia Cloud Computing Association, it's a inverted commas, mature industry already. Is there still opportunity? Is there still space to make money? And I think that Amarjit and Lightstorm prove that actually, yes, there are actually opportunities. So from one startup to a veteran of the industry, StarHub, Sander, please take it away.
Thank you. So I'm the VP responsible for product management, pre-sales, and network delivery in the enterprise part of StarHub, which is the lesser known part of StarHub. If you're from Singapore, then most likely you will know us from the quirky advertisement, internet, and the TV. But we also do a lot more than that, predominantly in the enterprise space. So as part of my product responsibility, I'm also responsible for emerging services, which includes Web3, the metaverse, which came up in the question. I get to speak to a lot of clients that go, okay, the metaverse sounds exciting. What actually is it? We had Mark Zuckerberg that came in last year and kind of put a claim on that. I don't know if there are any people from Meta in the room, but he somewhat spoiled the whole thing by creating an association with Web3, which is not really, well, representative of what's happening. If you look at Web3, it's an evolution of where we are today to an environment which is more immersive, real-time, potentially 3D or augmented or virtual reality. And if you're a carrier, a telco provider like us, that future can't come soon enough, right? Because we're investing in mobile network, we're rolling out 5G, we have our existing cable investments, we have our existing domestic network investments, and we're looking for new ways or new models to build business on that. So this is where the metaverse or Web3 technologies for us are an opportunity. Now, from an emerging services perspective, frankly speaking, it's a space which is still relatively hard to find business models that make sense, right, for us as a telco and for our clients. There's a lot of things happening in this space. There's a lot of noise. If you look at the crypto market, that generates a huge amount of noise. But just like with 5G, as an industry, we're still feeling out what that particularly means, the metaverse. Okay.
Thanks, Sander. I do think that there are buzzwords and then there are buzzwords. I think the metaverse, for me, I do feel that it is a little bit buzzy, but Web3 technologies are still, I would say, fairly nascent in how we're applying them. Yes, cryptocurrency, and we will come to that, but I think that the proof cases, I think we're still right now exploring it, so I'm still really very excited, so thank you for bringing that up. By the way, before I turn the mic over to Mark to introduce himself and PCCW, the format for this discussion is if you want to ask questions, just raise your hand at any point in time, by the way, to raise your hand and ask the question, because I think we want to make sure that you get the best use of your time, and I think that it will be great for interaction as well. So, Mark, your turn to introduce yourself. And
my name is Mark Helpfinger. I work with PCCW Global and Console Connect, two brands under the HKT environment from Hong Kong. HKT you might know as the leading ICT provider there, publicly traded. PCCW Global operates globally, a Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 network worldwide. And Console Connect, which is our automated fabric, which in simplest terms automates all forms of connectivity on an on-demand basis to cloud, to other networks, to applications, leveraging either fixed networks or mobility. That's what we do. In terms of your question, I would say instead of focusing so much on the trends, I would tend to focus on what our technology and product teams are doing, which is literally to blaze a path for network as a service, facilitating those elements of connectivity and automation. Increasingly, what we're seeing is that no matter what we want to do in the future, we want to do so in an automated fashion. And automation means on demand. So that means not just being able to click to get to something, but to be able to bill for it only for what is consumed and not unnecessarily, which provides new product opportunities and new thought processes. Both the automation component as well as the on-demand component are meaningful. In order to do that, you need to be thinking across the board, from the end user application use case and all the way back to how you correlate your BSS and OSS relationships to the evolving partner ecosystem community in order to facilitate what's commonly referred to as platform economics. So from my point of view, I'm excited about all the buzzwords, but at the end of the day, it comes to what is the model of utilization. And the model is generally, in today's world, with younger generations of procurement, focused on platform-based economics for ease of use on an on-demand basis. And that's what our product teams and technology teams are focused on. They're doing amazing work.
thank you. And I think that really sets the tone for a lot of the reimagining and the repositioning for products and services that I've seen at least. One of the things which I remember one of my friends spoke to me about was, I did not realize that the procurement officer was so young. And you're like, okay, well, that actually does change a lot of the conversation tenors. A lot of I won't say that it changes how the business runs, but definitely changes, I think, how some of the products are expected to perform. So that idea of network as a service, how do you actually work up and down that consumer stack all the way from what do you think the end user wants all the way to how does our product team actually develop and connect with, Mark mentioned the developer community. I think we're back to where we were a couple of years ago with cloud computing and developing that ecosystem again, which is never bad because I think you always need a community. But let's go back to some of the things which we discussed when we were talking about the panel. And Sander, the question I think we'll start with you. How are telcos, how are refocusing business and diversifying that the service offerings for, or the offerings, not maybe not the service offerings, but just the offerings for Web3, for Metaverse, for this new generation, and how do we capture new growth areas from your perspective? Not just how do we do it, but how have you observed some of the trends along the way now?
Okay, that's a good question. So from a startup perspective, we've talked a lot about our Dare Plus strategy, which is the transformation strategy to move us from where we are today, which is still a traditional telco serving media and mobile network, to what more a digital service provider. So what does this actually mean? Now, as a Singapore consumer company, we are in 1 out of 2 households from either with a TV product or a mobile product or with other products. It gives us an opportunity to change that conversation with customers, right? So the reference was made towards the Gen Z generation, people that are used to do things more online, right? People that don't necessarily want to go to a shop to buy something, but are perfectly happy to use an app to do that. And that's effectively the business model which we're targeting from a consumer perspective. Right, so we're moving from inline TV to OTT TV, making media interactive, creating experiences around that, and driving, in that way, engagement and building new business models around that. So one example on the consumer side, what we've done is our health application. Another is travel insurance. Travel insurance, for example, is something we offer when people go roaming, right? Because we can detect when somebody goes overseas, and that's a good opportunity to go off and say, hey, you're going to travel, have you considered your travel insurance? On the enterprise side, the conversation is slightly different, right? So we do see our enterprise clients themselves experimenting with these business models, and that drives different demand on the network that was mentioned earlier by Mark and by Amajit, but also different demands on how you consume services. So from a support perspective, a lot of our systems and processes today are still built around a hybrid model, but online, offline. But we increasingly see a shift with people being comfortable with doing things completely online. If you look at the younger generation in procurement, they're perfectly happy to buy things through a portal. Right? Just give us your price book, just give us your product spec. We already know what we want to buy. If we need help, we'll call you. Which is a big change from a generation before, which still prefer people to come physically into the network and put a PowerPoint and talk about what's happening. But it's that itself drives a big change on our infrastructure as well, which is why we've embarked on this transformation strategy called Dare Plus.
Thank you. I just came back from Indonesia where I was having a discussion with OJK and BI, this is the financial regulators, and they were asking for exactly that, this idea of RegTech and SupTech, regulatory technology and supervisory technology. And they were like, well, you know, we want to move our audit functions to make sure that we can check, but we need for the network now, for the networks now and the banks to show a dashboard so we can understand it. But they are increasingly, 3-4 years ago when I had the same conversation with them, they were not comfortable with that. They actually wanted to see the actual physical reports and go to the data center. Like, why? But they wanted to go to the data center to touch, see, smell. I don't know what they want to do, but they wanted that. But I do agree that the models were of purchase, the models of accepting logical virtual mechanisms for reporting, in my instance, in this example, definitely have changed. Mark, what about for yourself and for the work that you do? You mentioned earlier that there are ways in which we want to capture different communities and different partners across the layers? Is there a market difference in which you're connecting the communities around, or are we still going about the same way of connecting with people? I'm assuming that there are some changes for sure, but how are the business relationships changing?
Well, life is of course different. I never used to wear these colorful Console Connect socks, but I do now, right? Because that's just being different, and you have to think out of the box and accept the change. And so the change that we're seeing, I think, 20 years ago, we would send our sales guys out, and 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago, send our sales guys out with pieces of paper and a pen in order to figure out what the network requirements were, and the guys who were procuring network, they were the kings of the hill of procurement. Now that's not happening anymore. You have developers who want to have certain forms of infrastructure, and their view of infrastructure may not be network. It may be probably more likely some element of compute and store in the cloud. Applications want to find additional channels in order to get to themselves, and even verticals, various industry verticals, have their own interrelationships, and you use the word community, which to us is critical. How can verticals in their communities, establishing their own platform economics and platform relationships, how can they interact with one another? Pfizer did a deal with BioNTech in Germany in order to help the world get their vaccines, but they never had a physical interconnect between them. And if they would have each taken a port with us, for example, they would have been able to automate an interconnect in order to deliver very important data securely without us ever getting involved, leveraging our network, each of them simply having a connection to a connection. That's community. To have developers and engineers interacting with one another over a common platform for secure connectivity, one to another, and then to cloud, or then to an application, or to IoT, that is community. Sorry.
Was it necessary for you and the team to actually start to tear apart the parts of the existing things the products that we used to sell, so that customization could actually be sold on a fairly more granular basis? I would imagine that with COVID-19, there were a lot of people who were demanding, and maybe it's a trend across the years, demanding more customized solutions. So I want to piece together my network as a service, but you need to allow me to do this and that, but I don't want to buy what you used to offer, which was this chunk. Can I pull apart part A, part B, and part D?
Yeah. See, your question is about evolutionary organizational behavior. How do you take something that is from a so-called legacy environment and transition it and reshape an organization? We did something very simple, and those who have heard me speak in public forums will have heard this, but I'll explain it now from an organizational perspective. PCCW Global acquired a very intelligent technology company led by our CTO, Paul Gamp, who happens to be here today. Console Connect, we acquired at the end of 2017. And within a very short period of time, we understood, exactly to answer your question, that actually Console Connect needed to acquire PCCW Global. We needed a smaller technology company that was nimble, clear and focused, with a structured, agile framework to completely take over the larger company that theoretically knew how to do things. Because we didn't. We knew how to do things yesterday, and Console Connect knew how to do things tomorrow. And so what I've said publicly since to the team and to everyone is that Console Connect effectively acquired PCCW Global. And we completely changed methodology, organization, product set, and evolutionary approach. And it's a, admittedly, continuous work in progress in order to get there, but that was the approach to do it. We had to take a technology-based startup environment, confirm ourselves as a technology player that also has the physical attributes of network as a value add. And the moment we were able to convince ourselves internally that that was clearly our approach, then we started to have execution success.
That sounds good. Thank you very much for that. How about yourself, Amajit? I mean, in terms of that value creation, pulling apart organizationally, the relationships which Sander also mentioned, the ecosystem, how has that been for Lightsource?
Yeah, see, for us, it's a very interesting question because
Lightstorm.
It's our existential mission. And I'll lay out the provocative hypothesis. The elephant in the room is the status quo on digital infrastructure has been challenged every part of the world. So on one hand, I used to work for Microsoft for almost 10 years. This is the impact of investment and in innovation. I don't know how many of you guys know, Meta invested about $8 billion in just metaverse 1 year alone. So just the sheer weight of innovation and investment is pushing through lots of what I call solutions looking for problems to solve. Yeah, and that's an interesting problem to have, because all of a sudden customer experience is no longer a function of smart software with DevOps engineers that you build and just render. The quality depends on how it interoperates across the infrastructure. I call it digital infrastructure, which telcos have been solving for the last 25 years. And those infrastructure has been what I call built to last. Designers built infrastructure for 50 years, 100 years sometimes, whereas this new infrastructure has to be built to change. Mark talked about it. So that calls for a perfect confluence, and it's like a perfect storm for the industry. And I dare say in about 20 years' time, we'll look back at these years and say, this is when telecoms transformed to be able to provide something dramatically new for new generations. Now look at the problems in Asia. On one hand, you have people looking for experiences, which is virtual reality, metaverse, and what have you. But don't forget, I have my friend from Bangladesh right in front. There are about 1 billion people in South and Southeast Asia who are not even connected. And their problems are different to solve. They're the millennials. They know Facebook, they know Insta, but they're not even connected. So how do you take the cost of digital infrastructure and connect them at a superlatively different business equation than anywhere in the world? The templates are failing and failing very badly, which means that if you have to serve digital infrastructure at $3 a month, that's a completely different question than serving at $80 a month. I represent an investment firm as well as an operating company. So we think digital infrastructure as a class needs to be completely rethought of as an asset class. People who built roads in the US, people who built power plants, thought about that as an asset class and the specialization around asset classes, as opposed to people who ran consumer services back in your home. So the time for a netco and a servco, as the telco industry likes to call it, is real. You can see it in the wireless industry. It's getting disrupted in Japan. It's getting disrupted in Europe by people who just build the stuff off the air. I used to be in Motorola back in '95. I wouldn't have ever imagined you can build a base station in the cloud. But that's a reality. So the point I'm making is that puts the space for forward-looking telcos, and of course, people who want to invest and grow. That includes my own existential mission in Lightstorm and what we do across Asia to be able to change the paradigm, drive those leads. And in fact, think of this whole proposition as a built from ground, built greenfield, new infrastructure, and almost challenging the status quo as is. So that's the kind of problems you're facing. And of course, it's not easy when you have lots of buzzwords from both sides of the treat table flying around, from the telco side as well as from the software side. And I dare say that the thing to watch for is the meltdown. I sometimes wonder why small software companies trade at multiples of 100, which nobody understands why, and why big infrastructure telco companies trade at 6 or 7 multiples. And Mark would know that it's so hard to figure out how the mathematics adds up. It's not about customer lifecycle value. It's about perception and the longevity of the business. And that's, I think, the bet collectively the industry needs to solve. We're in the middle of solving tough problems as a startup. We are not short of funds, but we are short of tough problems to solve and solve them fast. So I'm glad, Mark talked about it. Some telcos are challenging themselves, and that's so interesting because you can learn from each other, replicates from one market to the other. And I think Asia is a hotbed of the ability to make things work, which can actually be scaled right across the globe, simply because of the scale of economics. So that's the summary of from our vantage point, what this looks like.
It does sound like that there are a lot of opportunities out there, but the danger is, as you started from, the creating solutions to problems which don't quite exist yet. And that I think that right now, there is some space, I think, for a lot of experimentation with the new technologies, Web3, and like I mentioned, Metaverse. I know Mark said, we don't only want to focus on that, but definitely those are the buzzwords which are driving a lot of the end user demand, and therefore I think would be shaping, I would imagine, some of the new products and services that are being put on the table. But I may not know this. So the next question that we're going to ask, but I'm going to pause for some questions first. But the next question I'm going to ask is really around, is there going to be an impact or ripple effect from these new technologies, if at all, or what's coming up the horizon? But I'm going to pause here to see if there are any questions from the audience to any of our panelists on anything that's been raised. Yes, sir. Could we get a microphone to the gentleman? Could you introduce your name and your company at least? And if people want to ask you for your name card after this, then they can ask you.
Hi, Albert Suarez from Green Revolution Cooling in Texas.
Hi.
My question is, where does sustainability fall in the value chain of the new reality?
Love that question. Where does sustainability fall? Thank you.
Anyone can answer. Thank you.
Yeah, we will get to that. Thank you. Albert, right?
Albert, yeah.
Albert, okay, we'll get to that. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, the gentleman over there. I'm going to collect the questions so that we'll hear them, and then we have some time to think and react instead of reacting immediately.
I'm Manish. I'm from Tata Communications. I'm part of collaboration and connectivity solutions, and roaming is part of that. Hence my question to you, Sander. You mentioned that you're utilizing quite a lot of analytics based on consumer data at StarHub, and one of the examples you gave was to predict whether insurance would be something that would interest your consumers. So. My question is, have you seen any success there? Do you think there's value? Do you think the analytics is getting there? Just that.
Okay. Yes, the analytics around user behavior add a lot of value. In Asia context, I'm from Europe, so we have quite strict privacy regulation. Singapore, not so bad, I have to say. But there's a lot of things you can do with metadata, right? So anonymized data. So in terms of the ability to predict consumer behavior based on location, based on what they do, based on how they interact with us with the app, we are able to predict what people want to do and make suggestions based on that. We also work the other side of the fence, right? So as an example, for a health app, when customers buy, say, an Apple Watch, which has health benefits with us, we position this and say, look, it seems that you're interested in your health, right? Have you considered how you would use that data? Have you considered other ways that you could use that data? For example, for insurance purposes, we've announced in September collaboration with a hospital and 3 doctor practices where we actually allow doctors to access health data collected from StarHub users. Right, and this is changing the way how we do care in Singapore. Right, it allows, so in the old model, in the offline model, care used to stop when you left the hospital. In the new model where everything is connected, you can actually keep monitoring people after they leave the hospital, right? And you can use that data, well, given that this is health data, it's obviously treated differently than the metadata that we have on roaming users on our network, but it gives you a different way of interacting with people and leveraging that data.
Thank you, Manish, for that question. On the environmental question that Albert asked, does anybody want to respond to that?
I can take that. So, look, being a newborn and having run companies which were pretty old in the past, I can tell you sustainability is not even an option. It's a passing criteria for investment. At this very point, I'm looking at investing in a country in Asia where we haven't put in a single dollar. But the passing criteria for the investment to pass through is to prove how it's going to be long-term sustainable. It's no longer about the society, the governments, and the regulators, which they are. It's also about the large monies which ride behind investments, which are asking for legitimate questions to be answered. So that trend is not stopping, and that trend is real, and it is looking for newer answers. And the dial moves a little differently based on which country you are, but in general, it's not even an option anymore to say whether it's a yes or no. It is a yes.
If I can add to that, Since you mentioned by country, so in Singapore, the Singapore government is trying to drive a lot of behavior around sustainability, and they're raising every so many years the bars for companies in terms of sustainability reporting. Now, we have a sustainability practice, which is part of the BU that I run. The problem that we see is that within Singapore, there's probably about maybe maximum 5% of building owners and business owners that really have sustainability sorted, right? So they know what they're doing, they have the reporting in place, they can do the things that they need to do. For the other 95%, sustainability effectively becomes a cost, right? Because the government just told you that you had to do it. So what we're trying to do from a startup perspective for these companies is to make it tie back to business processes, right? Because sustainability ultimately is about controlling and saving cost. Right? It can be energy cost, it can be labor cost, it can be risk, right? It can be people risk, it can be health risks. Yes, there is a definite sustainability angle to all the new technologies and the old technologies that are out today. And going forward with the way how sustainability focus is evolving globally, we'll see more of that.
Yeah, I'll just organize the sustainability question a little bit differently. And I would say that we're talking here about the fundamentals of an industry which is focused on the growth in data consumption. The more you compute, the more you store, the more capacity you require. You mentioned the metaverse, and I'll try and throw in an answer to that as well. Say the more we move into this metaverse technology that's being involved, the more we want to hit with AR and VR, we're going to have even more data consumption, reduced latency requirements in order to get to it. Yes, we threw the pebble in the water and we're going to see a ripple effect. The question is, what is the timeline for that ripple effect to become meaningful and profitable to companies? And in the meantime, what you're going to have is enormous amounts of data consumption, which means more power consumption. And so I think that within the framework of thought process of our industry for sustainability, we need to become more aligned with how the power industry thinks and how we can align with the sustainability goals that are there. I tip my hat to the Infrastructure Masons, which is a parallel organization in our subset of industries around data centers particularly, who have come out with sustainability goals associated with the data center power consumption component and how they would like to be carbon neutral or even have surplus of value over time. I think it's ambitious what they've set forward, and may not fully appreciate all of the connectivity and applicational elements that will take place behind them. But at least in their space, they're taking on a responsible position. But I really believe that we in the data production business or data movement business, if you're in the connectivity side, really need to pay close attention to energy alternatives, power alternatives, the costs of them, which will be shifting. And we're not exactly always dependent on that. And there's a balance, if you will, between cost and environment. Let's wait and see when we'll be able to convert waste to hydrogen and how that will impact the amount of processing that we'll be able to do. I think that's the ultimate goal. And I think we're a ways far away from that, perhaps the same timeline as Meta becoming meaningful to every individual in Bangladesh. Right.
I don't know whether that's going to happen, but definitely, Alfred, I hope that that sort of started to answer the question. I do think that there is always going to be a tension between, good things like environmentalism and a business imperative, and that alignment where it makes business sense to actually support the initiative helps prevent something as terrible as greenwashing. You don't want to try and make a product look green when it isn't actually green. You actually want to make sure that it doesn't. We have 5 more minutes for this particular panel, and again, I'm very conscious that I'm standing between you and lunch. I want to, instead of spending time talking about sexy things like the metaverse, I want to see if anybody has any more questions. I believe our friend in the front here has a question. Anyone else has a question? Please raise your hand and we'll spend the rest of the time.
Hi, my name is Farhad from Amra in Bangladesh. I just had, we were discussing one particular project because, as you know, Bangladesh is a very small country with a very dense population. And I think a lot of companies, including for data center companies, are struggling in urbanized areas because of want or demand for power. So one of the ideas that came to mind was to have or to build a green power source, maybe outside of the city towards the coastal area, where we could use both a combination of solar and wind power, and pump that power into the national grid, but then take delivery in one of the urbanized locations. Now, the initial take from the government is great idea, wow, but to kind of fast track that, is there such policies already existing in any other location that you would know of, which we could, take a kind of take from where they are and take a proposal
I'll
forward?
be happy to share with you offline afterwards, after the panel. We can talk. There's particularly markets in Africa, I think, have been quite developed in that environment. You've seen localized activities, particularly in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, on the west side of Africa, that are focusing on that. And I can give you some names of providers that are engaged in that if you wish.
Love it. It's like crowdsourcing a problem. Why not, right? Any other questions at this point in time? Questions? It's like having a free TED talk. I feel like all my answers are obviously parsed. I'm a director level, and they get parsed from a CEO level. So it's like getting elevated to MBA advice here. No? All right, then I will wrap up our session by asking our panelists to tell us, in terms of just next steps, where are people, if they're looking to say, I want to look at my service, my offerings, and I want to be re-engineering them for this next lap, next horizon of growth, what would you give them, what advice would you give them to look into? Starting from Mark, and we're going this way.
My advice, next steps? Go to the Console Connect desk, get a pair of these socks, and then go and take a port in any reasonable data center and start to automate what you do. Make sure that you are also talking to your engineers and your procurement teams and understand that developers in your organization are going to lead the way. And you want the developers to be engaging in that procurement process so that you're looking at the word infrastructure across the board. Infrastructure means the physical element. Infrastructure means the code, the databases. It means the networks, the data centers, and all of the code that is driving your day-to-day product. And you need to be talking to people that understand that integrated procurement requirements. But start with getting the socks, please.
Is that available also at the booth? Okay. All right. Never let it be said that I, as a moderator, don't give you space to give you the advertisement space.
Neil, do we have enough socks here?
All right. Amajit.
Yeah, I'll save myself of the advertisement, but I'll say what we do for a living, and I'll invite everybody in the room to do so. We're in an industry in a time where I think we got to just challenge every way you consume information, from whom you consume information, and including telcos and content providers, how you disperse that. In our company, we manage a credo called Challenge the First Order. So take every existing challenge and just question it till you turn it over. By the way, the industry needs those answers. And I dare say, just like Apple pivoted the use of data back in the 90s, I think the digital industry needs to pivot, particularly the infrastructure industry. And that's coming very soon. So that would be my invitation. So look for providers who are new and challenge the old guys.
Okay, so understand the problem, definitely talk to a whole bunch of people up and down the stack to understand what you need to re-engineer. Sander?
Within the StarHub context, what we've done is we've launched a KISS initiative. Now, most of us will know KISS from Keep It Simple, Stupid, right? But in our context, it stands for Keep It Smart and Simple. So how the initiative works is very simple, right? As an employee, if you encounter an obstruction, waste, or anything, you can just email this team or chat them, right? They will come back to you and they will work with you to remove that obstacle for you in the business. I'm head of product. I often get asked about the new things I launched, but I actually would rather talk about the things that I took away, right? Because for every product that I launched in the last 2 years, I've taken 5 products away, right? And that's what keeping it simple is about. It's about removing a lot of complexity from your organization, from the people that do work, right? Because that's the only way that we as a business are going to transform.
And there you have it. That is your $3,000 worth of advice or business advice of what's next in your business, what you should be doing next. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Please give the panelists a round of applause.
Yeah, thank you very much to our esteemed panelists and Mayan, our moderator. I think we got some good advice on, automation, how to re-engineer products, and on SOX. So thank you very much to everyone for coming along and for asking your questions. Lunch break now. We'll reconvene after the break with the next session. So please join us for that. Take care, everyone. Thank you.